start off with the beheading of John, why not? So I'm going to just put a few pieces kind of in front of you, just to kind of help you understand this. This is actually a very complex piece of text. So there's a couple of things I want you to understand. First of all, there's a bit of a conflict between the way Mark tells his story and it's told in the other scriptures, in the other Gospels, because in the other scriptures, the child is known as Salome, and not Herodias, who is actually the mother. And I think Mark made a mistake there, or the translators made a mistake. Somewhere there's been a mistake that in Mark, the child is known as Herodias, just like her mother. When you read it in the other Gospels, it's Salome. So it's the same person. The other piece is, she is a girl. She's a child. She's probably under the age of 12, because 12 being the age majority, or at the time when a person in that time and place would have been classified as an adult. So she's under 12. She's just a little girl. So I just want to kind of lay that in front of you, so you have it. So let's look at this piece of scripture. First of all, I want to say, one of the things I love about this piece of scripture is it kind of deals with the argument that the pulpit should not talk about politics. Because that is probably one of the most political pieces of scripture there is. This happens in the center of power. This is all about politics. You can't escape from it. We can't dress it up and make it pretty. In fact, the only way you can dress it up is to lay all of the blame of what happens in this story at the feet of a child. By saying that this scripture is actually all about a child tempting a man who is her father, using her sexual prowess. And that story has actually been used like that. It has been used violently against women like that. But that's not what the story is about. And the reason people do that is they don't want to deal with the reality of this story, which this is a story about political power. So when people say that the pulpit is not a place to talk about politics, it's absolutely the place to talk about politics, because that's a political thing that just happened. It's a very political thing. It's a flashback scene. You know, like all good movies, there's always the flashback scene, right? And this is one of them. This is a flashback scene in the Gospel of Mark. Jesus is out and about and he's teaching, and Herod hears about it. And the things that Jesus are saying are reminiscent of what John the Baptist had been saying when he was alive. And Herod is anxious. It makes him nervous. He thought he had gotten rid of the troublemaker when he had John beheaded. But here's this other man coming along and not only saying the thing John the Baptist has said, but he's saying more. And so we have this flashback. Herod telling the story being told of how Herod beheads John. Herod, a puppet king of the Roman Empire, is having a birthday party. Today seems to be all about parties. We're having parties everywhere. Muriel's party will be much less violent than this one. But Herod is having a party. And he, of course, is a powerful and influential man, and when you're that kind of person, you don't invite your friends. You invite the people who can help you. You invite the courtiers and you invite the leaders and all of the people of power and influence, because it's not a regular birthday party, it's the birthday party for Herod. But Herod is still a father. And his little girl comes out and she dances for all his guests. And he's so enamored by her dancing for his guests. He says to her, like any dad would, "I will give you anything you want. What do you want?" Now, go, wow, I want the new Barbie mega house and a horse and some candy from my favorite store. You can kind of imagine the list. But she's a little overwhelmed and she runs back to her mother and says, what should I ask for? I'm a princess, like I have everything. What do I ask for? And her mother turns around and says, ask him for John the Baptizer's head. And the little girl runs over to her dad and says, I have to ask for John the Baptizer's head. That's what I want. Herod is caught in the political power that he has created in this moment. He cannot break the promise he has made in front of all of these people to his own daughter. For if he is to break the oath he has made in front of all of these people to his own child, all of these people who are sitting around watching what is going on are going to know that he will break any promise and any oath he has made to them. If he cannot keep a promise to his own child, he is certainly not going to keep a promise to political leaders. And Herod has to follow through. And he kills John the Baptist. Sometimes when we're in positions of power and authority, we sometimes find ourselves painted into a corner. Because we enter into powerful positions not realizing that we have to enter into them with a huge amount of humility and a huge amount of willingness to be wrong. And yet, we, who are often those who put people in positions of power, do not like when our politicians or our leaders are wrong. We don't like to hear the words, I don't know, out of someone who we put in a position of authority. We expect them to know everything. I remember one time I got absolutely hauled over the coals because I did not go to visit a very elderly lady in my last congregation who had been very, very sick. And I just got totally hauled over the coals about it. And I was in so much trouble because this was a very prominent person in the congregation and she had been very sick. And I said, I called. And there was no answer. And I said, well, she was in hospital. And I said, well, no one told me she was in hospital. And her name did not come up on my visitor list when I went to the hospital. She hadn't registered as a member of our community when she registered at the hospital. And someone said to me, but you should have known. I was ordained, I was not given ESP. There was an assumption that because I held a position of power and authority in the congregation, I was supposed to know everything about everybody, including when you got sick and didn't tell me. There is this assumption that we put people into positions of power and authority, and we expect them to know everything. And those people behave like that because they have been given some mantle, imaginary mantle of authority that they believe they cannot show weakness in their leadership. How many times have you gone to a boss or somebody of authority, you know, like a civil servant, and if you're dealing with the city or the government or something, and they'll tell you something, and 3 weeks later you find out it was wrong? Who's been there? Like, you've had that, right? You've been told something, and so you go and you act upon it. And you find out 3 weeks later that actually everything you did was wrong. It was the wrong forms you filled out, and you applied for the wrong grant, or you applied for the wrong whatever. And you go back and you phone the person back and you say, you told me that this was what I was supposed to do. And they said, and I've actually had this, they said, well, I didn't know what to say, so I just told you what I thought. Not helpful, right? Not a helpful place for anyone to be in. But this person has taken on this mantle of authority in such a way that they actually believe that they cannot admit that they don't know anything. Because the ability to admit that you don't know anything means that you must be weak. We see it all the time. We see it in church council meetings, we see it in city council meetings, we see it in parliament, we see it in our world leaders. The inability to admit that you might not know something. In fact, you'd rather make garbage up than say you don't know. Because we have put them into a position where we would rather have them speak garbage than admit they don't know something. Because we have decided that that is a sign of weakness. When did that happen? I think it happened a long time ago. I don't need an answer to that question. I mean, it happened a long, long time ago. It's been in our culture, our DNA, for millennia. And yet here's John the Baptist, a man who is weak beyond all measure, has brought Herod to his knees in fear because Herod thinks he's come back. This man who had preached and whose story then carries on into the life of Jesus, this man who has preached a particular way of existing in the world had actually brought Herod to a place of fear. John had faced the powers and principalities of his day and had actually made them fearful. Preaching a story and a meaning of life that is about admitting our weaknesses as human beings is actually terrifying to people with power. It's actually terrifying to them. Because we are actually suggesting that the way that they want to run the world might be wrong. A world where you can't admit you're wrong and you've made mistakes. A world where we would rather hear garbage than truth. A world where we would rather acknowledge, just simply go along with something because somebody in authority has said it's the right thing to do, than question and ask questions, is a world where they cannot cope. They'd rather hide away from it and not see it than acknowledge that the people may have questions about who they are. And Jesus, in his story, repeats much of what John says and then expands on it, where he comes along and says, yes, actually, the best way for us to deal with the world is to acknowledge that we are broken people, that we are weak and helpless without God. And that all the bravado of those who believe they are in power is nothing to the power of God. And Jesus will show us the power of God when he gets to the cross. You see, there's two options when Jesus gets to the cross. He could be rescued, or he can show what love can do. He could be rescued and saved from crucifixion, or he can die and then be resurrected and show us that the weakness of love and compassion are more powerful than any person who sits in power and authority and makes oaths and ridiculous promises in front of their courtiers. The power of weakness, of acknowledging our brokenness, is more powerful than anything else. And it's a hugely political statement, because we are acknowledging that the world as it is set up is a false world. Because a world built on false promises and false ways of behaving and a lot of lies. Because people would rather lie to us than acknowledge that they don't know the answer. How much more powerful would it be if we acknowledged truth? If we acknowledge the truth of ourselves, if we acknowledge the truth of our lives, if we acknowledge the truth of our brokenness, how much more powerful would our lives be? Because we would be our authentic selves. And everyone around us would be their authentic selves. And we would create communities of people who are willing to acknowledge who they are and who each other are and who God is for them. And there would be a community where God rules, where we would follow in the way of Christ. This is a deeply political passage, because this passage asks us one question. Who do you believe rules your life? And who do you want to rule your life?